The 100 Interaction Social Repetition Blueprint. Welcome to my channel, Habit Compass.
You know, we usually think that overcoming social anxiety requires like a complete personality transplant, right? Society kind of tells us we need to read these incredibly dense psychology textbooks, or perfectly memorize clever conversation starters, or somehow just magically force ourselves to become the life of the party overnight. But trying to leap from super shy to instantly charismatic in one bound, yeah, that usually just leads to way more anxiety and literally freezes us in our tracks. So instead of that totally overwhelming approach, we're looking at a completely unique blueprint in this video, one that relies on committing to one very specific, highly structured goal. It asks a really simple but honestly incredibly daunting question. Could you talk to 100 strangers in exactly 30 days?
Okay, so that 30-day mark, that is your entire timeline. 30 days. We are putting a firm, completely immovable boundary on this experiment. Think about it. Think about how often we set these super vague goals like, oh, I'll try to be more social this year, or I'll definitely start talking to more people. When we do that, let's be real, it almost never happens. Open-ended goals usually just result in failure because, well, there's always a tomorrow, right? But giving yourself exactly 30 days, that builds a rigid, targeted container. It creates this intense psychological sense of urgency. It literally forces action, meaning you can't just indefinitely push off your interactions until you finally feel ready. You just have to start.
And within that 1 month time frame, 100 is exactly what you're aiming for. Picture a giant 100 counter just hovering right in front of your eyes as you walk down the street. Throughout this entire challenge, this giant counter acts as your singular, totally objective metric of success. And honestly, this is actually incredibly liberating. You don't have to worry about being funny. You absolutely don't have to be charming or witty or memorable. No way. You literally only have to watch that counter go up. Every single interaction, no matter how incredibly brief or totally clumsy it is, takes that number higher. Now, here is the absolutely unexpected hook of this entire blueprint. It completely 100% lowers the stakes. See, when we think about talking to strangers, our brains trick us. They make us imagine that we have to hold this captivating, perfectly fluid conversation. And that pressure, that is exactly what keeps us frozen. But the golden rule for this challenge, you have explicit, guilt-free permission to abandon the interaction the very second it starts. I mean it. It absolutely does not matter if you run away immediately. Seriously. If you walk up, blurt out a single word, completely panic, and then literally power walk in the opposite direction, you still win. The counter still moves. To really understand why this works so well, we have to look at what these interactions actually are. We call them micro-interactions. These are tiny, remarkably low-stakes social exchanges. Look, you aren't trying to make a new best friend here or find a romantic partner. Not at all. You're treating these early, incredibly awkward attempts strictly as essential brain training. Psychologically speaking, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, it basically treats social rejection almost exactly like physical danger. So by engaging in a micro-interaction and simply surviving it, you're literally just showing your nervous system that initiating contact with another human being does not result in actual disaster. It's a biological rewiring process, just taking it one tiny exposure at a time. This whole journey follows a beautifully designed structural progression. It operates exactly like a ladder. You start way down at step 1, where your only job is to just blurt out hi and essentially flee the scene. Then, by step 2, which is right around the halfway mark, you upgrade to asking a stranger for super simple directions. And finally, by step 3, your brain has neurologically adapted enough to the exposure that you can actually stand tall and hold a genuine conversation. It takes you from literally fleeing an interaction to slowly, steadily mastering it, and all without ever taking a leap that feels too terrifying. Let's zoom in on the reality of that very first tick on the counter for a second. The infamous tick number 1. You walk up to a stranger on the sidewalk, you hastily say hi, and you immediately rush away. Now, it might feel ridiculous, it might feel super embarrassing, but let me tell you, that action absolutely counts as a massive success. You did the hardest part. You broke the invisible, heavy barrier of silence between two strangers. You proved to yourself that you could initiate. You got the counter to tick to 1. And honestly, in this blueprint, building that initial momentum is absolutely everything. So fast forward a couple of weeks and you move right into the messy middle. You're approaching the 50th interaction. Here, the strategy shifts just slightly to require a tiny bit more engagement. You start asking for obvious, super simple information. You walk up to someone, excuse yourself, and just ask, "Where's the library?" Or, "Hey, do you know what time it is?" And here is the absolute secret to this phase. You do this even if you have a smartphone right in your pocket that could literally tell you the answer in 2 seconds.
Because remember, the goal isn't to gather information, the goal is the counter.
By the time you hit that midpoint, tick 50, a really remarkable physical transformation occurs. You are visibly less shaky. All those intense physical manifestations of social anxiety, the trembling voice, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, that awful feeling of a lump in your throat, they all just begin to settle and dissipate. And why is that? Simply from the sheer repetition of the act. Your brain's alarm system is literally calming down. It's looking around and realizing, oh, wait, we've survived this exact scenario 50 times already. Nobody yelled at us. We're safe. The threat response naturally shuts off. It's amazing.
Then you arrive at the final milestone. The giant counter hits 100. The person who just 30 days ago was whispering hi and sprinting away in a complete panic, well, now they're standing tall. And actually, not only are they standing tall, but their posture is relaxed and they're comfortably talking to a group of people at a coffee shop or a networking event. And hey, this isn't because they magically became an extrovert overnight. No, it's because the relentless repetition has built a rock-solid foundation of genuine, completely unforced confidence. Now, this blueprint really forces us to seriously question traditional advice about building social habits. Usually, society tells us to focus deeply on the quality of our interactions, right? We're always told to seek out these deep, meaningful, enriching conversations that foster true connection. But listen, for someone actively grappling with social hesitation, that advice is actually terrible. It sets the bar impossibly high and basically causes immediate paralysis by analysis. This blueprint mandates the exact opposite approach to start. It asks you to completely ignore quality, totally abandon perfectionism, and just get the numbers up. We really need to hammer home the core philosophy driving this entire 30-day challenge. Quantity is vastly greater than quality. The sheer volume of your attempts is so much more important than the substance of the dialogue. Let me put it this way for you. A terrible, completely awkward, heavily stuttered 5-second interaction where your voice cracked and you ran away, that is infinitely more valuable for your brain training than sitting alone in your room, perfectly imagining a smooth, flawless, hour-long conversation. The messy reality of exposure always beats the pristine illusion of perfection. Ultimately, you can summarize the entire goal of this 100-person challenge into just one single, undeniable principle: practice. That's it. It completely strips away all the mystical, super complex theories we have about charisma and charm, and it just boils social skills down to raw, repetitive mechanics. Think about it just like learning the finger movements to play a new song on the piano, or, developing the muscle memory to shoot a basketball. Talking to people is simply a physical and neurological skill, and it absolutely improves the more times you physically execute the action. So take a second and look around you. The counter is currently sitting at 0, but your 30 days start whenever you decide to take that very first step. So I have to ask, who will be your number one today? If you learned something new, subscribe to the channel for building better habits through navigating Compass, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.